When Batman Caped Crusader debuted, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense that resembled déjà vu. And no, I'm not referring to the similarities to Batman the Animated Series. It was more about their approach to Batman and the changes they made to the characters in an effort to modernise them. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I started doing a series of videos comparing the various animated versions of villains seen in the various Batman animated shows over the decades. And that's when I realised that Caped Crusader reminded me of the rarely mentioned Beware the Batman from 2013. This was a show that shone the spotlight on more obscure villains like Professor Pig, Anarchy and Magpie, while also focusing on lesser known established villains such as Ra's al Ghul, Killer Croc and Two-Face. Caped Crusader did something similar by introducing Firebug and Nocturna, while offering new takes on the Penguin, Clayface, Catwoman, Harley Quinn and Two-Face. And this got me thinking, why don't more people talk about Beware the Batman? I've noticed a trend in recent years of other channels releasing videos talking about 2004's The Batman, saying how it was the most criminally overlooked Batman show of all time. Statements like that leave me scratching my head though, because people do remember that show, and some people are incredibly vocal about their love of it. But anytime I bring up Beware the Batman, I get comments from people saying that they had no idea that the show existed. So today, I want to pay it its dues because it's a good show, and I think it is massively overlooked. In fact, I'd say that it is probably the most overlooked Batman show to date. Beware the Batman was spearheaded by Glenn Murakami and Mitch Watson, and if the name Glenn Murakami sounds familiar to you, it's because he has worked on tons of beloved cartoons over the years, starting with Batman the Animated Series as a storyboard artist, before he became the art director on the new Batman Adventures and then went on to produce the fan favourite Teen Titans cartoon, among others. And I don't mean to suggest that he was entirely responsible for the show. Obviously, there were a lot of other talented people working on it, including some other DCAU veterans like Butch Lukic and Kurt Gader as directors, and the legend that is Andrea Romano casting and directing the actors. So the show had pedigree. Rather than just repeating what had come previously, the team decided to shake things up, both narratively and visually. So first of all, let's talk about their visual approach. Much like the Green Lantern show that was airing around the same time, Beware the Batman was entirely computer generated. That meant that their character models were more consistent, with dynamic lighting that looked pretty swish. However, in doing some cursory research, that seems to have been part of the problem with the show. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of expense. This kind of animation was very expensive. For instance, in traditional animation, backgrounds are flat images that are either painted physically or digitally, and characters are placed on top of them. However, in Beware the Batman, all of the backgrounds had to be rendered in 3D, like a video game. This allowed them to create some really cinematic shots with literal depth, but it also drove up the budget. In my eyes, it was worth it, as this show is very stylish and visually distinct from everything that had come previously. From the all red and black title sequence, which Matt Reeves totally reused when producing marketing material for his film, The Batman, to the action-packed fight scenes. Sure, some of the animation could look a little bit off at times. For instance, these SCU agents' movements is just a little too perfectly in sync to my eye, but generally this was a very flashy show with some great action scenes. In terms of the narrative, the show was a response to another Batman show, Batman the Brave and the Bold, which had just ended. Where that show had been lighthearted and focused on the other heroes of the DC universe, Beware the Batman was intended to be more serious and return the spotlight to Batman. One of the things I liked about the show is the way that most episodes could be watched on their own, but if you watched every episode, you could see the threads of a larger storyline coming together. And the same was true of Caped Crusader. Beware the Batman was set during Batman's early days, back when he wasn't on the best terms with the police, and really went out of its way to avoid using the big hitter Batman villains like Catwoman, the Joker and the Riddler, although the Penguin was briefly teased. Instead, the first episode introduced Professor Pig and Mr. Toad, although a far more sanitized version of the characters. In the comic books, Professor Pig is a diabolical surgeon that is obsessed with mutilating people in order to turn them into perfect dolls. In this show, he was something of an environmentalist, targeting billionaires that he blamed for harming the planet. Other obscure villains that were featured in the show included Magpie, an unhinged jewellery thief, who was fairly faithful to the comic book original. Then there was Anarchy, an all-white counter to Batman, where Batman tries to fight crime and impose order. Anarchy claims to represent both freedom and mayhem. And Humpty Dumpty, who in the comics was obsessed with breaking things and putting them back together again, including people, while in the show he used toy soldiers to torment the people he believed had wronged him. While the first half of the season focused on Ra's al Ghul and his League of Assassins, including Lady Shiva and Silver Monkey, plotting to take over Gotham, the latter half revolved around Harvey Dent's downfall as a casualty in Deathstroke's scheme to replace Batman. There was a lot going on, and they really packed each episode full of plot points, utilising mostly obscure characters. And I think that kind of hurt the show a little bit. I can remember there being complaints about the Joker not featuring, with some saying that Anarchy had just been reworked to act as a substitute, although I don't really agree with that. Sure, this version of Anarchy was different to his comic book counterpart, who tended to punish the people he viewed as wicked and immoral, but he wasn't that much like the Joker in Beware the Batman. Kind of reminded me of the Spider-Man villain the Green Goblin, just kind of skulking around in the background causing mischief. Anarchy was more of a trickster with a scheme and less of a murderous lunatic. Everything he did served a purpose in his overall strategy. One of the key plot points that I think is similar to Cape Crusader is the fact that Batman starts out isolated and he doesn't want to involve other people. His team consists of him and Alfred, and that's the way he likes it. Although this version of Alfred really plays up his military background, with him as a working class former MI6 secret agent. A lot of people think of Alfred as a kindly old man, so perhaps this brawling former super spy with a shaved head, who was quick to use his fists, was a little out of viewers' comfort zone. I know that one of the first promotional images for the show, featuring Alfred with guns, certainly caused a stink back in the day. But Hardman Alfred, as I've decided to call him, wasn't heartless. He was still a surrogate father to Batman and wanted the best for him. In fact, Alfred was a surrogate father to a number of people in this series, including Deathstroke. Alfred could see that they needed help to focus their anger, and he wanted to provide it. But one of them was more receptive than the other. At the end of the first episode, Alfred introduced Tatsu Yamashiro, Bruce's new bodyguard and eventual ally in his war on crime, Katana. And she was someone else that Alfred would take under his wing. Now, Katana will be familiar to readers of the Batman comics of the 1980s, when he famously quit the Justice League and set up his own super team consisting of some lesser-known heroes called the Outsiders. What, you're telling me that general audiences aren't up to date on their 80s Batman comics lore? Outrageous. Well, that's another thing that threw people. They bypassed Robin entirely and skipped straight to the early days of Batman and the Outsiders by teaming up with Katana, who wore a costume that more resembled Nightwing's than her comic book counterpart. I think the all-black costume made a lot of sense, but some viewers viewed it as rubbing salt into their Dick Grayson-shaped wound. And sadly, whenever you introduce a female character that is perceived as a replacement for an existing male character, heaven forbid, a vocal subsection of viewers start foaming at the mouth, especially when the character isn't white, which is frankly pretty tedious. But Katana wasn't the only hero to appear in the show. Metamorpho, Manhunter, Oracle, even a heroic version of Man-Bat made appearances, and many of them would go on to join the Bat family by the season's end. While Batman had been resistant to working with these people initially, by the final episode Batman is only able to save Gotham from Deathstroke by banding together with his mini-team of Outsiders. Batman flat out said that he realised he was wrong to isolate himself, and that having help is a good thing. Batman learned a lesson and opened up to people, kind of like the ending of Cape Crusader. I think that one of the reasons Beware the Batman is so overlooked is down to an issue that has, thankfully, been relegated to the past with the rise of streaming platforms, and that is TV scheduling. When Beware the Batman was on TV, it was often moved around in the schedules, meaning that regular viewers ran the risk of missing it. Now, the executives clearly did this because, for whatever reason, they felt like it wasn't performing. Of course, the irony of this is that the more you move it around, the worse it'll perform. If I were feeling cynical, I'd say that some people within Cartoon Network, the station on which it aired in the US, didn't want the show to succeed. In which case I would ask the question, why did you buy it? Co-showrunner Mitch Watson attributes some of the blame with toy manufacturer Mattel, who were lined up to release toys based on the series but then pulled out, deciding to produce their own separate line of Batman toys instead. This dramatically reduced the show's exposure to casual viewers, and when coupled with the shifting schedule, the ratings likely weren't what they needed to be. Which is a shame because some of the artwork they'd put together for Season 2, including a sneaky little peek at their version of the Joker and an unmasked Two-Face, looked really promising. Also, take a look at the updated Bat family with Man-Bat Metamorpho, Katana looking even more like Nightwing, Barbara Gordon as a Carrie Kelly-style Robin, Cyborg, and what looks like a Red Arrow Robin mashup. I think this looks pretty cool. But the good thing about this day and age is that once something is digitized, it'll live on forever, assuming Warner Brothers doesn't delete it off of the internet in an attempt to reduce their tax bill. R.I.P. Infinity Train. Although if that were to happen, I've still got my digital copies at least. They're safe from David Zaslav's lust for reducing Warner Brothers' tax bill. So yeah, to close out this rambling tribute to the most overlooked Batman show, Beware the Batman, I think we can summarise it as an ambitious show that might have focused too much on obscure parts of Batman's mythology, namely his time as the leader of the Outsiders and the menagerie of animal-themed villains, with few household names. Given the high budget and the lack of support from the toy company and the network, this led to it being lost in the TV schedules, to the point that people that were fans may have struggled to keep up, which is absolutely what you don't want to happen if your show has an overarching narrative. Maybe people weren't ready for Hardman Alfred and Katana either, which is a pity. But hey, maybe after watching this video, you might feel inspired to check it out. I recommend it. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time it'll be the space year 2025. Where has the time gone? And what better way to ring in the new year than to look back at a villain seen in 2004's The Batman? Yes, you asked for it, so I'm doing it. But if these videos flop, I'm going to be very sad. We're going to kick things off by looking at the Joker. Hope to see you then.